"We're using your lake house all summer." That was the first line that lit up my phone on a Sunday afternoon, delivered with the aggressive confidence of a declaration, not a question. It wasn't from a scammer. It was from my own mother in our family group chat. My coffee instantly tasted like ash. Notifications immediately exploded beneath it, thumbs ups, celebratory emojis, and a finally from my older sister. They were scheduling their entire summer vacation at my property, a house I spent 5 years of my life restoring without a single phone call to me. I watched the screen heartbeat steady hands perfectly still. They assumed my silence meant agreement the way it always had. They expected the reliable, non-confrontational younger sister, Elena. I am 32, an architect, and the family's invisible emergency fund. But that afternoon, the script changed. I smiled not out of passive acceptance, but recognition. I set my cup down, closed the group chat, and whispered to the empty room, "All right then, let's see how this goes." I knew they were already 6 hours into their drive toward Lake George, heading straight for my secluded property. They were laughing, making grocery lists, assuming they'd walk right in. I, however, had spent the last 2 days preparing for their grand arrival. I didn't type a single word of protest. I didn't block them. I just waited. And when their silver SUV finally pulled up the gravel driveway, the first thing they saw wasn't a welcome mat. It was the brand new motion-activated 4K security camera system I'd installed that morning. The cameras would capture their expressions when they realized that the dependable sister they always took for granted had finally drawn a line in the sand, a line backed by an alarm system linked directly to the county sheriff. If you've ever had to become the villain in someone else's story just to protect your peace, hit the subscribe button. And stick around, because the most satisfying part of this story is watching the entitled finally face the consequences. 2 weeks before that detonation of texts, I was staring at a blueprint, not a phone screen. I am Elena, 32, a successful independent restoration architect based in Chicago, a city that feeds my professional ambition but starves my need for quiet. My relief, my genuine escape, was an hours-long drive away in Lake George, New York. That house, a white cabin trimmed in slate blue, was not an inheritance, nor was it a simple real estate investment. I purchased the structure 6 years ago, when it was little more than a collapsing skeleton, and spent 5 methodical years rebuilding it from the foundation up, designing and crafting every detail myself. It became the tangible proof of my dedication and discipline, a sanctuary built against the backdrop of my family's chaos. Unlike me, my older sister Melissa, 36, had always been lauded as the family's golden child. She possessed a loud, impulsive charisma that Mom and Dad Frank and Martha consistently mistook for genius. Melissa's life, however, was a string of financial disasters, failed startups, repossessed luxury cars, and perpetual debt. Despite her failures, every available family resource, every ounce of my parents' attention was funneled directly to her. "She needs the support, Elena. She has the kids. You're the sensible one, you're single. You manage your money so well you can afford to help," was Martha's constant mantra, a thinly veiled justification for financial exploitation. For years, this played out in a relentless pattern. I covered Melissa's insurance lapses and Greg's gambling debts, masquerading as business expenses, transferring sums that often climbed into the tens of thousands of dollars, money I earned by sacrificing my personal life and holidays. They treated my success not as an achievement to be celebrated, but as an ever-replenishing family emergency fund accessible only to them. Whenever I gently pushed back, Dad Frank would side with Melissa, using emotional blackmail to maintain the illusion of family peace, which was really just Melissa's absolute control. The Lake George house was the first thing I bought entirely for myself, that I flatly refused to share or sell. I knew its profound significance. The quiet it offered was the antidote to years of my family's relentless noise and demands. I had already given them a spare key 3 years ago, hoping to share the peace. But Melissa and Greg quickly warped that generosity into expectation. They used it without asking, often leaving messes and expecting me to clean up. I had tried to set a boundary once weeks earlier, stating politely that the summer was reserved for Mark and my own architectural research, gently declining Melissa's casual request to borrow it for a long weekend. Melissa had laughed dismissively, a bright, careless sound, and said, "We'll just see what Mom and Dad say about that, Em." The underlying threat was clear. The family dynamic always favored the one who demanded the loudest. My quiet refusal was immediately overridden by their assumption of ownership, and as I drove back to Chicago, the unsettling feeling of being overlooked and undermined simmered beneath my professional calm. It was not a surprise then, but a confirmation of their ultimate arrogance when my phone vibrated late that Tuesday night, pulling me away from Mark and my design drafts, announcing the brazen invasion of my last sacred space. The family group chat, already an arena of passive-aggressive demands, morphed into a detailed itinerary for my own forced eviction. The initial message from Martha simply announced the summer booking, but the replies from Melissa and Greg were what truly ignited my cold fury. Melissa immediately claimed the master suite, the room I had specifically designed with a private balcony overlooking the lake. "I'll need the master for the kids and me. They can't sleep near the kitchen noises. Elena, you can take the guest couch or the attic storage loft. It's only fair." She typed her words oozing with patronizing concern. Fair in Melissa's dictionary meant, "What benefits me entirely." She then proceeded to tag Frank and Martha, confirming their approval for the room division, making sure I understood the entire family was united against me. The next message predictably came from Greg. Instead of contributing to the planning, he issued a list of demands for my preparation. "Em, since you're heading up there this week anyway, could you make sure the gas tank on the pontoon boat is full and stock the main fridge with imported beer, prime steaks, and the good kind of artisan sausages? We're bringing guests and don't want to deal with a shopping trip right away." I stared at the screen, my vision tunneling with a rage so intense it felt physical, not emotional. This wasn't just a simple request for use. It was an exercise in power and humiliation, treating me as their personal unpaid servant and concierge. For a moment, my fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to unleash years of pent-up resentment. "You parasitic failures will never step foot on my property again, and I'm done funding your delusions." But then Mark, my fiancé and a brilliant cybersecurity engineer, calmly reached across the table and touched my wrist, stopping the emotional outburst. "Don't send it, Elle," he said quietly, his voice a steady anchor in the storm of notifications. "What's the goal here? To win an argument, or to win the war?" I pulled my hand back, breathing deeply. "To make them understand what a boundary is. To make them suffer the consequences of their entitlement." Mark nodded, leaning back. "If you send that message now, they win the moral high ground instantly. They'll cry that you're unstable, that you've changed, that they were only trying to love you, and they'll play the victim to the entire extended family. They'll claim they were confused, not malicious, and they'll never be held truly accountable." He paused, letting the silence emphasize his point. "We have a better way. Let them believe they're going to use the house. Let them believe you're staying quiet out of cowardice, just like always. Let them drive all 6 hours, unpack the cars, and show up ready to move in. They need to commit the crime fully. If you stop them now, it's just a family argument. If they break in, it's a felony, and that's a legal consequence they can't talk their way out of." His words were cold, logical, and perfectly aligned with the architectural precision I valued. It was clarity, not revenge out of spite, but justice delivered with meticulous planning. The plan solidified instantly. We would allow them to act on their assumption of ownership, documenting every brazen step. My strategic decision was made. Silence was no longer my weakness. It was my tactical advantage. That Thursday morning, I emailed my boss requesting 2 personal days, citing a critical property issue that required immediate solitary focus. Mark did the same. We packed minimal bags, and by sunrise we were in my SUV heading north, not to prepare a welcome but to turn my quiet sanctuary into a perfectly calculated trap. The air smelled like cedar and damp earth as Mark and I pulled up to the Lake George house. We didn't waste a minute. My architectural mind immediately went into logistical mode, treating the house not as a home, but as a site-specific project requiring calculated modification. The first phase was establishing the hollow fortress. We immediately called a local moving company specializing in fine art and antiques. Over the next 36 hours, we methodically cleared every item of intrinsic or sentimental value. The heirloom clock, I restored the collection of first edition architectural books. The custom-made furniture and all my personal art hung on the walls. Everything was packed, cataloged, and shipped to a secure off-site storage unit in Albany. We left behind only the bare necessities, older, worn furniture that was difficult to move, and basic kitchen equipment. The message we wanted to send was clear. What they thought they were getting, a fully furnished luxury resort, was now little more than a staged empty shell completely devoid of my presence. Once the house was physically gutted, we moved on to operational controls. I contacted the utility companies and had the gas line for the outdoor grill and the hot water heater shut off, citing unforeseen maintenance. The high-speed satellite Wi-Fi access, the very feature Melissa planned to use for her endless social media updates, was temporarily suspended, leaving only a basic cellular signal that Mark controlled through a secure hub. They could sit in luxury, but they wouldn't have warmth, entertainment, or connectivity, stripping their coveted vacation of all modern comfort. The second phase, Mark's specialty, was the security upgrade. He bypassed the old system entirely, installing a state-of-the-art surveillance network. We affixed compact high-definition 4K cameras with integrated microphones under the porch eaves near the dock and discreetly above the main French doors. These cameras were not only for recording, they were tied to Mark's private servers, streaming all activity directly to our laptops and phones, ensuring we had real-time, undeniable evidence. Crucially, he integrated advanced glass break sensors into every large window facing the lake and the driveway. These sensors were linked to a new industrial-strength alarm system, but more importantly, to a verified commercial security monitoring service that had a direct, expedited line to the local county sheriff's department. This bypassed the typical delay of a neighbor calling 911. An alarm triggered would be treated as an immediate confirmed break-in. We then replaced the driveway gate lock and the main door smart lock with new high-security versions, ensuring that none of the old spare keys Melissa possessed would function. Our final and most crucial legal step was preparing the visual evidence. I drove to the nearest sign shop and purchased 2 large commercial-grade aluminum signs, bright yellow with stark black lettering: "Private property, no trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." We mounted one sign prominently on the newly locked front gate and the other near the driveway entrance, placing them at eye level where they were impossible to miss. This eliminated any possible defense of "we thought it was okay" or "it was an accident." Every action they took from the moment they arrived would be a conscious, documented violation of New York State trespassing law. We completed our work by Friday night. The house, pristine yet hollow, felt quiet and utterly still. Before we left, I stood on the porch and looked back at the fortress I had built. I felt no guilt, only a cold, decisive clarity. The battle was won not with shouting, but with meticulous preparation and the calculated leverage of the law. We drove back to Chicago, arriving late Friday, just hours before their expected Saturday afternoon arrival, ready to watch the drama unfold. Saturday at noon was D-Day. Mark and I were situated comfortably in our apartment in downtown Chicago, an entire state away from the unfolding drama. We sat across from each other, each holding a warm mug, the only unusual decor in the room being the triple monitor setup Mark had connected to his server, displaying the live 4K feed from Lake George. The picture was crystal clear, the cedar-sided house shimmering under the afternoon sun, the pristine lake reflecting the blue sky, and the crisp yellow warning sign glaring at the end of the driveway. Precisely at 12 o'clock, a trio of vehicles rounded the bend, a leased luxury SUV driven by Greg, carrying Melissa and their 2 children, Frank and Martha in their own sedan, and a utility trailer loaded with coolers, designer luggage, and water toys. They looked exactly like a family ready for an expensive, hassle-free resort vacation dressed in resort wear, already laughing and pointing. There was no hesitation, no hint of suspicion, just a brazen, unearned confidence that this place, this sanctuary I built, was theirs for the taking. Melissa was the first to jump out of Greg's SUV as they reached the electronic gate, completely ignoring the large, newly installed private property, no trespassing sign fixed right next to the code pad. She bounced up to the gate with practiced entitlement, punching in the old access code that I hadn't changed in months. The lock light flashed red. She tried again, then swore under her breath, turning back to her parents. Typical mom. Elena changed the code and didn't bother to notify us. Frank, Martha, and Greg emerged from their vehicles, annoyance etched on their faces, not confusion. Martha complained loudly, the microphone on the gate camera picking up every word. "Oh, for heaven's sake, why must she always be so difficult? Frank, call her." Frank obediently pulled out his phone, dialed my number, and received the automated message that the number was currently unavailable. I had turned on the blocking feature specifically for today. They stood there for a few tense minutes, not considering the possibility that they were explicitly uninvited, only that I was being inconvenient. The tension was abruptly broken when Greg, his face tight with irritation, marched back to his SUV. "Forget it," he grumbled, his voice grating and arrogant. "I knew she'd pull something like this. She's trying to spoil our vacation." He didn't reach for a spare key or even try to call again. Instead, he opened the trailer's toolbox and pulled out a menacing pair of heavy-duty bolt cutters, their jaws wide and powerful. We watched silent in Chicago as Greg walked back to the gate, the sun glinting off the metal tool. He inserted the sharp jaws around the newly installed thick steel padlock securing the chain-link gate, and with a grunt of effort squeezed the handles. Clang! The sound of the lock snapping open was surprisingly loud through the camera's audio feed. He tossed the broken lock into the bushes and swung the gate open with a flourish. "There," he declared to Melissa, clearly proud of his decisive solution. "Let's get in here. She can send us the bill for the lock later." This single conscious act of property destruction, documented from 2 camera angles, was the moment the civil dispute ended and the criminal one began. Greg had officially committed vandalism, criminal mischief under New York state law, a Class A misdemeanor. The whole family piled back into their vehicles, cheering slightly as they drove through the now breached gate, their entitlement validated by their own forceful action. They parked their cars in the crushed stone driveway, excited to finally get into the coveted house, oblivious that the clock was ticking, and they had just walked across the threshold of a very carefully designed legal trap. The moment the vehicles stopped, the family rushed the front door, eager to claim their prize. Melissa swaggered up to the heavy steel-reinforced entry door, attempting the old 4-digit code. It predictably failed. She swore, her voice rising in frustration as she jabbed at the new smart lock pad, which simply blinked red in response. Frank and Martha stood back, visibly annoyed, their anticipation for a relaxing weekend quickly dissolving into familiar irritation directed entirely at me. "Elena always makes things complicated," Martha whined, adjusting her designer sunglasses. Frank, automatically defaulting to his role as peacekeeper and enabler, pulled out his phone again, attempting to bypass my block by calling Mark's number, which also rang busy. They were rapidly losing patience not because they were doing anything wrong, but because their sense of entitlement was being inconvenienced by my preparation. Melissa turned her face, a mask of escalating rage and impatience, spotting the pristine French doors set into the living room wall nearby. They were antique glass panes restored by my own hands and beautiful but less structurally reinforced than the main entrance. "The key must be inside," she snapped, directing Greg with a commanding gesture. "Get in through the window and open the latch. We're not waiting out here all day. It's too hot and the kids are fussy. She's going to have to replace the glass anyway." Greg, eager to please his demanding wife and prove his usefulness, didn't hesitate. He looked around, furtively convinced that because the gate was down, their actions were technically private. He walked over to the ornamental fountain, picked up a heavy, smooth river stone, and strode back toward the window. We watched from Chicago, a silent, sickening anticipation gripping my chest as Mark slightly adjusted the camera view, ensuring Greg's face and the stone were clearly visible. Greg raised his arm and with a swift, violent motion slammed the stone into the pane closest to the lock handle. The sound was deafening, a brittle crash followed by the tinkling spray of tempered glass shattering onto the antique floorboards inside. Busy! Instantly the house erupted. The high-decibel alarm Mark installed, an industrial siren set to 120 decibels, howled through the quiet forest air. It was a piercing, unbearable sound, designed to disorient and terrify. Martha shrieked, covering her ears, while the two children started crying hysterically from inside the SUV. Greg, startled but momentarily triumphant, reached through the shattered opening, fumbling for the internal lock mechanism. Before he could turn the latch, Mark, calmly pressing a button on the console in Chicago, activated the two-way audio feature. My voice, amplified and chillingly clear, boomed from the hidden exterior speakers, cutting through the siren for a split second. "Get away from the door. This is Elena. The security company has confirmed the break-in and notified the county sheriff. You have 2 minutes before they arrive. You are trespassing and committing felony property damage. I am watching you." The effect was immediate and devastating. Melissa's face went white with shock. Frank stared wide-eyed at the camera lens, finally realizing the silence was not surrender, but a setup. They were caught. Instead of running, however, panic replaced reason. Greg and Melissa scrambled frantically, trying to find the source of the alarm, believing if they could just shut it off, the police would stop coming. They violently shook the reinforced door, trying to force it open to get inside and find a security panel, convinced it was a simple technical hurdle. "It's just an alarm, find the box," Melissa screamed at Greg, ignoring the wailing sirens. The loud cries of the children and the incessant bzzz from the house filled the audio feed as the family committed themselves deeper to the crime scene, racing against the approaching sound of justice. Mark glanced at his watch and then back at me, a grim expression of satisfaction on his face. "Time's up, Elle. Dispatch just confirmed units are 2 minutes out." And then, cutting faintly through the screaming alarm, we heard it, the distinct rising wail of police sirens approaching rapidly through the distant quiet woods. The wail of the sirens grew rapidly louder, slicing through the incessant alarm. Within seconds, 2 patrol cars from the local county sheriff's department sped up the drive, their lights flashing blue and red, casting chaotic shadows across the lakefront property. The officers reacted exactly as trained for a confirmed alarm and forced entry. They were professional and decisive. 2 deputies, hands hovering near their sidearms, quickly surrounded the porch. "On the ground, everyone now," one officer commanded through a bullhorn. Frank, Martha, Melissa, and Greg immediately froze their faces, a mixture of fear and disbelief that this was actually happening to them. Greg, still near the shattered window, was the first one physically restrained. He was immediately cuffed and ordered to lie face down on the cold gravel driveway. Melissa started screaming hysterically, not about the danger, but about the indignity. "This is a mistake. He's my husband. This is my sister's house. We have permission." A deputy firmly pushed her back. Martha rushed forward, trying to intervene. "This is a family matter. We are the parents. Please call Elena. She will explain the misunderstanding. The scene was captured perfectly on camera. The shattered glass, the wailing siren, the desperate pleas, and the grim professionalism of law enforcement. The lead officer, a woman whose badge identified her as Sergeant Rodriguez, approached the front door. She examined the cut gate lock and the smashed window, then spoke directly into her radio. Mark in our Chicago apartment saw his phone ring instantly. It was the police dispatcher attempting to verify the situation. Mark answered, then immediately put the call on speaker and activated the video conferencing feature on the security system connecting Sergeant Rodriguez directly to me. My face appeared on the officer's handheld device, calm and completely emotionless. Elena. Sergeant Rodriguez stated formally, "I am the investigating officer. Can you confirm if these individuals have authorization to be on your property?" I looked at the sergeant on the screen, then deliberately shifted my gaze to Greg, whose face was pressed into the dirt, and to my parents who were watching me with stunned betrayal. I took a slow, deep breath, delivering the lines I had prepared for years. "Sergeant, I am Elena, the sole legal owner of this property. I have reviewed the video evidence in real time. They cut the gate lock and violently smashed a window to gain entry. I did not give permission, and in fact, I explicitly blocked communication. They are actively trespassing and committing felony property damage. I want to press full criminal charges, including the maximum possible penalties. There is no misunderstanding, and I refuse to reconcile." The words hung heavy in the air. Frank and Martha slumped their faces, pale, finally understanding the depth of my resolve. Melissa gasped, shouting, "You little witch! You set us up!" But it was too late. Sergeant Rodriguez gave a firm nod. "Understood, Ms. Elena. We have probable cause and video evidence. The individuals are being detained for unauthorized entry and vandalism." Greg was lifted and escorted to the patrol car. Frank and Martha were forced to sit on the curb, the epitome of entitled parents, watching their golden child and their own complicity result in cold, hard legal consequence. The summer vacation was definitively over. 1 week later, the crisp smell of sterile paperwork replaced the scent of lake air as I met my lawyer. My attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman specializing in property defense, concluded the meeting with a summary of the inevitable. Given the incontrovertible video and audio evidence, Greg was advised by his court-appointed defense attorney to plead no contest to criminal mischief and trespassing. He received 2 years of probation, a significant fine, covering all property damages, and critically for his career, the misdemeanor conviction meant losing his real estate broker's license, effectively ending his shaky professional life. Melissa, despite her frantic attempts to manipulate the narrative, faced public consequences. The story, fueled by local chatter and perhaps a discreet leak of the police report details, spread quickly through their small, interconnected suburban circle, damaging her meticulously maintained golden child image beyond repair. The local mommy groups and neighborhood watch boards were alight with discussions of Melissa's entitlement, transforming her from a favored sister into a pariah. Frank and Martha, having flown up to Lake George to retrieve the abandoned cars, and their tearful grandchildren, faced the quiet, unyielding wall of my final decision. I sent them one registered letter, a formal declaration of no contact. There was no room for negotiation or emotional appeal. I stated clearly that their repeated violation of my boundaries and their willing participation in a crime against me meant the relationship was permanently severed. They had chosen Melissa and the illusion of family peace over their relationship with me, and now they faced the consequence of that choice. The lake house, my beautiful restoration project, felt tainted. Every cedar plank, every pane of glass was now permanently stained with the memory of their entitlement and destruction. After the legal dust settled and the final repairs were completed, I listed the property for sale. It sold quickly, fetching a substantial profit due to its unique architectural features. I used the proceeds to purchase a remote private farmstead several states away, a place where no one knew my family, and where I could finally exist without looking over my shoulder. The entire ordeal was the hardest architectural project of my life, the final definitive construction of an unbreachable boundary. I did not lose my family that Saturday. I merely performed a long overdue surgery cutting out the cancerous tissue of manipulation and emotional exploitation that had threatened to consume my adult life. Elena was finally free.